Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 with Hangar Control. And today we're going to be diving into the axis bindings for Hangar Control. I'm going to teach you guys how to take full control of your axis and do things with them that you may not have previously thought of, as it wasn't available in the simulator. So stick around. One app designed to do it all. Hangar Control brings everything together: control bindings, hardware configuration, mod and profile management, application launching, add-ons, config files, and more, all managed from a single application. Mods Hangar goes beyond just mods and add-ons. It manages profiles, config files, text files, backups, snapshots, and helps keep your community folders clean and organized. Application Hangar launches your entire sim stack with a single click. Your Stream Decks are fully controlled through the Hangar Control plugin, while all of your other Stream Deck plugins remain active and available. Built by a simmer for simmers, Hangar Control adds new features and hardware support every week based on community feedback. It's a one-time purchase with lifetime updates, no subscriptions. You can try it for free for 5 days with no restrictions at overkillsimulations.com. Just create an account, head to your account page, download the latest version, and get started. And if you're looking for in-depth Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft tutorials, check out my Patreon site. Links to Hangar Control and Patreon are down in the description below. All right, folks, so we, as I said, are continuing our tutorial series through the control bindings of Hangar Control. So the idea behind this, guys, is to give you everything that you need to sort of set up your own custom builds. If you guys are interested in trying Hangar Control, make sure you go to overkillsimulations.com. Create your account first. Then you can hit the red account button and download Hangar Control. If you're interested in purchasing outright and just supporting my work, it is still important that you create that account first, and then you guys can follow along. If you have not watched the previous videos, I do recommend you check those out first, as it walks you through from the day that you first launched the application on how to get to where we are today. So, previously, we created our hangar, we created our profile for the twin complex. In this case, we were using the Black Square Baron A58 as our example, as we should be able to cover a lot of different items throughout this. I'm going to be showing you guys everything from the basics of brakes, rudders, ailerons, elevators, obviously your throttle, your prop, your mixture, but then I'm going to show you guys also how to do some other cool things with axis that you may not have thought of before. So, and it may solve some of your problems depending on where we're at. So the first thing that we want to do before we get started, that way we can test anything that we wish, is we want to make sure we start that service again. Once the service is started, we can then execute any commands we want and have them send off to the simulator. Okay, so the next thing is, let's go ahead and dive straight into the Bravo. From the Bravo throttle quadrant, there is already a preset for Microsoft Flight Simulator that will cover 95% of everything we're going to be doing here. However, obviously the objective here is to teach you guys how to do this stuff yourself, but if you wish, you could do that. You would select MSFS default, select load, and it would load the profile, and then you would be able to mouse over and see what all the various things do. But let's go ahead and keep that at custom for now, as we want to walk through this step by step. So we're going to dive into our axis. Here's the axis window for the Bravo throttle quadrant. You will either see this or you will see the default view if there isn't a device specific window like the Bravo has. But the principle behind it will be the same, because they will all lead to, once we click on one of these, this window. So this is our axis binding window. Oh, I just saw something move inside the sim. Let me clear all those controls, just so that's not a gotcha for you guys too. Let me show you what I do. Now, I don't have very many controls set up to this particular rig, so this part's easy, but you do want to make sure that you go into controls and you find, actually I have a lot. Never mind, I forgot I plugged them all back in. You can either create an empty profile for every one of your controls. Honestly, for me, believe it or not, I just find it easier to come in here, and you do have to do this every single time you start the sim, is come in here and deactivate them. You only have to do this once per session, but for whatever reason, Microsoft/Asobo did not make this a persistent setting, which is really annoying. But still, that's it. That's all it takes. And to me, that is still far less time than what it takes to create blank profiles and then buy aircraft, or do you want this all aircraft? And sometimes this will work. Anyway, digress. You guys can tell I'm a little bitter about that. We're also going to change my avionics because I do not have a GTN 750 currently installed. Not that we'll be needing those today, but since we're here, why not? Okay, perfect. So now get that kicked away. Let's get back over here. Let's get back after our axis as we were talking. So again, back into the Bravo in our case, the axis, click the axis we want, and here is our readout. So first we have obviously the position indicator. This tells you what position the physical axis is on. You have the ability to add a line, which we'll talk about the importance of that moving on later. Remove a line. You can change the sequence of a line. The axis tune window. We'll talk about this in greater detail later on. And of course, clear bindings. Okay. So we're going to start, as I promised, with the basics. Things like throttle, prop, mixtures. Let's get through those first. So we're going to simply add. We don't need any of this on the left because we're just doing full axis. Use axis is automatically checked. What use axis does is it says the variable I want you to put into the simulator is whatever position my physical axis is at. Here you choose essentially what process you're wanting. In our case, we want SimConnect as we are dealing with Microsoft Flight Simulator. We're going to go to pick. Here, I'm just going to come in here, and you can either search for throttle, or in our case, we want throttle 1. I'm going to sort by name. Now you can see you have axis throttle 1. You do not want the axis prefix. The axis prefix is used for any physical device that would be on a centered axis. In this case, for example, your rudder pedals are on a centered axis. When they are resting, when you have no action to them, are they centered? Your flight yokes, your flight sticks, they are also centered axis. We don't want to use that here. So what we want is simply throttle 1 set. Right there. This guy right here. Select it. Okay. Save. And then now, you guys can see down there at the bottom, throttle 1 is moving. Now let's rinse and repeat for throttle 2, but I'm going to show you a much faster way to do this once you have found the variable. We opened up throttle 1 again. I'm going to hit Control and A. That highlights everything in the box. Then Control and C for Charlie to copy it. Going to hit Save. Come in here. Add a line. Put my cursor in there. Control and V for Victor. And simply change the 1 to a 2. And save again. And there's throttle 2 ready to go. Let's do the same thing for prep and mixture. Prop and mixture. We're going to go back into pick. SimConnect is here by default. And here we're going to look for, I believe it is just propeller. Nope, it's prop pitch. I just saw it. Prop pitch. There it is. Prop pitch 1 is what we want. And again, same thing. Prop pitch 1 set. Select that. Now, I'm going to get ahead of the game for the next one. Control All. Control C. Save. Give it a test. Good. Go to our next line item. Add. Put my cursor in. Control V for Victor. And you guessed it. Change the 1 to a 2. Select Save. And test. And you guys can guess the process is the same for mixture. Mixture 1 set. There it is. And again, we're going to grab it, copy it, save, add, paste, change that to a 2, and save. And when we move the mixture handles, there's 1, and there's 2. Okay? So now, let's go ahead and stop with the Bravo for a minute, and let's move on to things like rudder pedals and our elevators, where I can also show you a couple other things inside of the Axis Tune window. So we're going to open up, in this case, our Moza AB6 as our primary flight control. So this is where we will bind our elevators and our ailerons. And you can see this is the default view because the AB6 does not have its own window. It's just not one of the cool kids. We're going to hit add, just like we did before. And this is the X-axis. Pick. And just like before. This one gets a bit easier, but remember what I told you about the axis prefix. Centered axis, we do want it. So we're gonna hit OK. And save. Now, you can see, well, I guess maybe you can see, if you can tell, if you understand what you're seeing here, they are inverted. Left is turning me right, right is turning me left. Let's fix that. We're going to go back into the axis. We're going to make sure this line item is highlighted. In this case, it's the only one. We're going to go to Axis Tune, and we're going to simply click Invert. Now, you have a couple of different options while we're in the Axis Tune window. You have the dead zone, which will set a range. If we were to increase this, for example, and I move the flight stick, it's going to move here because I haven't hit save, okay? But if I move this after saving, any movement inside of this range would actually not do this. You would see nothing happen in the sim until it reached that point. That's how the dead zone works. Neutral, same kind of principle. Neutral actions, it sets the neutral point of the axis. Where is the point at which the axis should be centered? This is very handy if you have a slight drift to one side or the other and you want to fix it forcibly. For example, if I was sitting here, okay, my hands are in my lap, I'm not touching anything, but I noticed that the yoke was slightly cambered off like this. Okay, if I wanted to fix that, I could adjust the neutral point, sliding one way or the other to fix it. And what would essentially happen is if I moved this, I would then see, after I hit OK, I would see the yoke center, or if I moved it too far, it would go the other direction. Okay, now I want to click that right back to where it was, because mine are fine. Saturation is the physical input of the device. This is the maximum output of the device. If I change that saturation, what essentially is going to happen here is it's going to require significantly less input on the yoke or on the physical stick to reach its maximum output. Okay? Again, we don't want to do that right here. So let's kick that back to where it was. Oh, that was the other way around. There we go. Now, at the same token, if we go this way, watch the orange dot, don't pay attention to the yoke. The orange dot is going to represent where the physical device will land. So here, I am now at the maximum output of the yoke. Okay, actually, let me go ahead and hit OK, and I will show you guys what's happening here. Notice that the yoke, I am at the maximum point of my physical device right now. It is hard over to the full right, and notice that the yoke inside the aircraft is not. Reducing saturation Y reduces the amount, the maximum input that you can send to the simulator. So in short, saturation X reduces the physical amount of movement on your physical device to get the maximum output into the simulator. So, for example, if you reduce saturation Y, this could bring you much closer to, say, the idea behind an F-16 flight grip. For those of you who don't know, the flight grip inside of the F-16 Viper barely moves, only about a half an inch in any direction. It's very pressure sensitive. So that's essentially what we would be reproducing here. I am barely, let me see if I can move this and you guys can see it. Yeah, watch the percentage on the left. I am barely moving my flight stick, and I'm getting maximum output sent to the simulator. Okay, so X is your output to the sim. Okay, reduces the amount required. And Y reduces the capable output to the sim. So we would only ever send 47% of your maximum curvature to the sim. And then curvature changes how sensitive it is in various ranges. If we reduce the curvature, in the smaller, lower, mid ranges, you're going to have more finite control. It's going to feel more sluggish. Okay, and then when you start increasing up to the higher ranges, you're going to get that maximum output. Okay, if we go the other way, then inside the center range, barely touching the stick, for example, will create a lot of movement very quickly, but still will not address your maximum output until way up here. You can see right about 80% is when you'll see the maximum output. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense on how curvatures and saturations work. Now, the next thing that you are able to do inside of the axis tune is you are able to actually disable an axis. You can completely disable the input by the push of a button. We could come in here, for example, let's bind it to this one here, and we're going to hit OK. Now, notice that I'm in here, watch that slider on the top left. Now I'm going to click that button. And I'm going to click the button again. So if you ever needed to disable an axis or wanted to disable an axis, maybe you're using it for something else on a different parameter, I don't know, okay? But you have that ability to do so as well. Okay, it really just depends on what you're doing and what your setup is, okay? So let me go back in there because I will forget that I did that. And let's clear that binding. There we go. All right. And we could also reset everything back to the default, but don't forget we did need to invert. So we're going to hit OK. Long explanation of the axis tune, but it was important to go through. So now let's set the elevators up and we'll be ready to fly, at least for this portion. And there's axis elevator set. And just like before, that's actually the wrong direction. So let's go back into bind, go to axis tune, and invert. And now we have everything working exactly as it should. So the next piece is let's go ahead and set up our rudder pedals. The Z-axis is always going to be the rudders themselves. And same thing, centered axis. So we're just going to type rudder. And we're going to look for there it is, axis rudder set. And save. And those are actually already looking good, although they are really far away from my feet, so give me a second. I have a stand-up desk, so I don't normally have them close by. Okay, so next let's do the brakes. Left brake is going to be slider 1. Just like before, go back into our picker. And this time we're looking for brakes, left. That's it. It will automatically resolve later on. And you can already see it depressing. We're good there. Rinse and repeat. And we could even do brakes underscore right. You are able to type anything you want in there, and as long as it's a valid command, you're good to go. All right, rudders and brakes are set. Engine power is set. Yokes are set. We are ready to roll. This is essentially a good base to start with, and you're complete here. So now let's get into some of the more advanced things we can do with axis binds. All right, guys. So now I'm going to show you some of the more advanced stuff that we can do with the axis bindings. And you can do this with any axis. It does not matter what it is. If it's an axis, it's an axis. Okay, so first thing, we're going to go into the axis, and we're going to clear our mixture too, just so that way we can use this. So I'm going to right-click on it, clear axis bindings. That wipes everything out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to address our flap switch. Let's go ahead and clear that out, and let's actually change the time of day a bit. Okay. just so that way we don't have the glare. Let's zoom in a bit. There we go. Okay, and let's readjust this. So here we go, back in here. Bringing that down. Back to our axis tune, click into our axis. What we're going to do is we're going to do the flaps as an example here of how you can segment an axis. Now, you can do this a number of different ways. So first we're going to add a line so I can break some things down. When we hit use axis range, okay, by default it uses the full 0 to 100% axis range that you guys saw previously. You do have the ability to customize that. You can uncheck that and tell it to, for example, if, I don't know, this is a great example is reverse thrust. If you wanted just from 10% up to 100% to be your actual throttle, and then from 9% down to 0 to be your reverse thrust keybind, you could do that. You can also use a reverse range. This is for specific throttles that actually have a reverse range built into them. And if you have one, you probably know it. It's more for Pro Series type stuff. You can also edit the custom output. And here you can see the most common range is from negative 16,383 to positive 16,383. But let's say you needed to change that to a B event. B events usually use from from -1 to 1. There are caveats. LVARs, you can have all kinds of stuff. It can be, usually it's position based, like from 0 to 5, for example, in some aircraft, or a condition lever may have from 0 to 3. Okay, so you can actually change the output range using that. But the reason why I bring up the custom range is because you can actually segment this into an axis range where it uses, like I told you before, from 10% to 100%, and that would be your forward throttle motion. And then from that 0% to 9%, have it be a keybind action or a sim connect event or something in DCS world like your throttle cutoffs, right? So let me show you how we would use that. Now I'm going to leave this as is because we're not going to do it here. But what we're going to do here is we are going to uncheck that, and it opens up this window here. Okay, now 50% range means that at the exact 50% marker, whatever action item you have here will fire, whether it be a keyboard event, a DCS command, X-Plane, SimConnect, doesn't matter. But what we can do is we can actually segment that further and change it to between. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to break down the flaps. Okay, I already know the command, so just follow along with me and understand that we're here to show what it can do, not necessarily the procedure for each individual item. So we're going to go from 0, we're going to break this up to about approximate thirds to 33%. In both directions. The other thing you can do here is you can set a segment where going up, which would be from 0 to 100%, it does action 1, but then you could create another line item where from 0 to 33%, if you were to set this to down, it would execute a completely different action in the down spectrum. So moving up, it could do one thing, and coming back down, it could do something completely different. Now, for our case, we're going to trigger this for both directions because we want this range in both directions to trigger our command, which in this case is flaps _ up. Do not mistake flaps up for flaps decrease. Flaps up will actually take the flaps from whatever position they're in to fully retracted. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to add a line, and we're going to hit between. We're going to uncheck our use axis range, and we're going to make this from, let's do from 35%. You don't have to have a buffer. I just normally put one to say 66. And again, this one's going to be flaps _ 1. And one more between, uncheck the use axis range, and this is going to be from, let's do 68 to 100%. And again, this will be flaps 2 for this particular aircraft. And we're going to hit save. Now, my physical throttle lever or physical axis is at the maximum position. It's on the Bravo throttle quadrant, so it's at full forward right now. Now, if I start moving it, you can see we're in flaps 1 range. and then it comes back up. The reason being is because of the triggering. So now when we come up, we should actually see it go the opposite direction. There's flaps 1, flaps 2, coming back down, flaps 1, flaps retracted. But we need to invert that, because when I pull it down, I want flaps to be down. So just like before, the cool thing about this is regardless of what you have set here, we can still come in, do invert, and it will simply invert the sequence. So now we're in flaps up, flaps 1, flaps 2. Coming back up, flaps 1, flaps 2, or flaps retracted, I guess, in this case. So another, like I said, a really good key advantage of this is specifically for things like LVARs especially. It makes it real easy to break down LVAR positions. Now, there are other ways that we will discuss in later videos when we start getting into binding some of the other aircraft. There are other ways that we can do that. You can actually set an LVAR to an axis. Okay, and so it will automatically segment that axis. But that doesn't always work. Okay, so what I mean by that is for example, a condition lever again. There are times where in certain aircraft, like the Black Square, for example, TBM 850, where the condition lever is actually an LVAR action. Okay, and LVARs work on positions, much like what we saw here with the flaps. It works on position 1, position 2, position 3. Okay, actually I think it's 0, 1, and 2. So the software will automatically split that up. You can just bind it, tell it to use the axis value, and off it goes. You do have to set the maximum number of positions, which we'll talk about in a later video. But this is really handy if you want to really customize those positions and set them yourself. This is also really handy for things like the PMDG 737, any of the aircraft that have a lot of flap positions. You can break them down, segment them to your own custom detents. This is, again, very helpful if you have like maybe a 3D printed detent. These are things that can work. If you want to turn an axis to strike keyboard commands, we can do the same thing. And that's the biggest advantage here, is these are, instead of using an axis in a traditional sense, you're taking an axis, you're splitting it up, and you're saying, in this range, I want you to fire this command that I would probably normally have on a button. Okay, so that's essentially what it does. It allows you to take an axis and turn it into a bunch of buttons by segmenting them out. And we can still take this, for example, if we had set this from this entire range was only from 0 to 33%, we could still take that remaining almost, 67% and use it as a traditional axis on something if we wanted to. And that would work as well. Okay, so I don't want to dive too much deeper into some of the more complex stuff yet, because I know that I've hit you guys with a lot in this video, and so I sort of just want you guys to take this and be able to play with your axis and different configurations. So, as always, guys, I hope you guys are enjoying these tutorial series. I hope you'll consider giving Hangar Control a shot. Stay safe and healthy, and I will see you in the next one where we get into binding some buttons.